what's interesting about the global financial crisis is that it started or originated in the financial sector, but for most people they didn't really experience it immediately. They experienced the effect of it, which was a mindset shift of austerity, over-promising, under-delivering, loss of trust, faith, and confidence. And of course that was mirrored with when, as credit dries up, so does funding, and companies had to cut back and stop spending. So I think with that it created a vortex into which people got sucked into, and for many countries they actually didn't experience it. Particularly in this part of the world there was growth. It just made people more circumspect about companies and brands and decisions, often postponing them rather than undertaking investments, whether it's in marketing or expenditure. Again, I think one of the effects was also to cast a new light on the world, almost a bipolar light. If you were in a company or in marketing or investment and you looked at the world and you said, look, would I prefer to invest and spend my time and effort, particularly in marketing and potential growth, in an older, aging audience, very marketing savvy, but with limited growth potential, such as Western Europe, North America, or Japan? Or on the other hand, a much youthful, dynamic, optimistic in terms of sentiment and outlook and approach, and growing market, Latin America, Southeast Asia, China, the BRICS and civic countries? Where would you rather put your marketing spend and your efforts? Where do you see future growth and potential? I think it's quite clear. So one of the effects of the financial crisis was to cast a different view of perhaps the previously held assumptions of the Western model. And hence opportunity goes where youth is. And most of the world's population in this part of the world is under the age of 26. So huge future potential there. We have some of our own proprietary tools, some crowdsourcing tools that we work with, as well as working with some of our clients, such as MasterCard is one of our global clients. We actually have undertaken some sentiment analysis of how people feel, not only about today, but about the future, and how they see themselves in that. And interestingly enough, in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, and replicated very similarly in Latin America, people are more optimistic, more confident, and also perhaps less cynical about marketing. They're savvy, but they're less cynical, and they're therefore more positive and open towards brands and brand communications, much more so than perhaps Western Europe or North America. And therefore the model of marketing is changing. I think that companies and organizations in Southeast Asia are going to experience some rapid growth. Many of them are already experiencing rapid growth, and it's comparable to the period of the 50s and 60s when advertising fueled by television and new media and an emerging middle class in the United States and Western Europe really developed the Mad Men concept of consumerism, the consumer age. Similarly, I think that's happening in Southeast Asia. I think that you're seeing that companies, particularly second-generation companies, managed and led by Western-educated, very sharp individuals, many from family backgrounds, are beginning to reinvent and take those companies from a supply and manufacture basis to a more sophisticated marketing basis and communications basis. And they're bringing some of these new tools, techniques, and I would even say mindsets to those organizations. Hence they're leapfrogging many of their competitors and even borrowing with pride from the Western companies that they've learned from, but actually outgunning them. And in fact, that's the exciting thing about this region. If you combine the emerging middle class, the positive optimism and sentiment of consumers, plus some more sophisticated marketing, which is not dependent on the old-fashioned television point-of-sale PR. And you see it branding being defined in a slightly different way, and a more interesting and challenging way. The future brands of the next 10 years are not going to be necessarily coming out of the United States or Western Europe. They're going to be coming out of Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, China, of course, Korea, India. That's where they'll come. They'll come from these companies I've just spoken about. And they will be emerging not necessarily because of their consumer spending power in advertising, but because of their ability to harness consumer insights, to truly innovate, both up the value chain as well as down, and also to use digital technologies, which are with a highly educated digital mindset, to connect people to brands, to experiences. And I think that's where you'll see some breakthroughs. And our future is tied to helping them understand that, emerge, and potentially compete with the traditional usual suspects, and perhaps compete not only here, but even in the more sophisticated, mature markets. So we want to be associated with companies that potentially want to expand beyond their home market, but go international and redefine branding in those markets.